fraud, this fabrication that volcanoes produce more CO2.
Let's hear Ian Plimer respond to that. Do you stand by the claim in your book that volcanoes produce more CO2 than the world's cars and industries combined?
Well, I'm very heartened that a journalist is correcting me on my geology. Now, Mr. Monbiot wrote to me when I asked him some questions of science and said he was not qualified to answer these questions of science. So he's a journalist and he's asked me a scientific question. He has not read this book.
Could you answer the question, please?
Wait a minute. He has not read this book.
Do you stand by your claim or not?
It is the height of bad manners to interrupt.
Do you stand by your claim or not?
It is the height of bad manners to interrupt.
Could you answer the question?
Mr. Monbiot is showing ill breeding.
Just hang on. I will ask the same question of you if I can.
And in this book, I referred to a number of types of volcanoes. There are two types, and I know you haven't read the book. He certainly hasn't read the book.
It's not true that I haven't read your book. As I told you the last time, I suspect that George
I have also read the book.
But I have actually read your book.
Let me make 2 points on this. On the chapter called Earth, I talk about two volcanoes. One of the terrestrial volcanoes, which is the USGS, reports on emissions of carbon dioxide. But more than 85% of the world's volcanoes we do not measure, we do not see. These are submarine volcanoes that release carbon dioxide, and we deduce
can I ask you a question
from
about
the
that?
Chemistry of the rocks how much carbon dioxide is released.
Can I ask you a question about that, if you don't mind? Because one British journalist, whom you quoted those exact figures to, went back to the US Geological Survey after you told him about this 85% figure, and he asked them to confirm their claim that actually 130 times the amount of CO2 is produced by man than volcanoes. The volcanologist, Dr. Kerence Gerlach, confirmed that figure and said furthermore that in their counting, they count the undersea volcanoes. So your response to that?
My response is that there are 220,000 undersea volcanoes that we know about. There's 64,000 kilometres of undersea volcanoes.
Which they have counted.
It is the height of bad manners to interrupt. Please restrain yourself. And we have 64,000 kilometres of volcanoes in submarine environments with massive supervolcanoes there. We do not measure them. And the figures that I have used are deduced from the chemistry of rocks which erupt on the sea floor.
Okay, all right, now that's that point dealt with. George Monbiot, a quick response to that and then we'll move on to other questions.
No, well, yeah. Sure. I mean, it's, again, straightforward fabrication. Ian produces no new evidence to suggest that the USGS figures are wrong. He keeps citing this statement that they don't include submarine volcanoes. It's been pointed out to him many, many times that the USGS figures do include submarine volcanoes. And actually, it's the height of bad manners, Professor Plimer, to lie on national television about something that you know to be plain wrong.
Okay, Ian Plimer, let me go to another point, because there are a whole series of questions raised by George Monbiot and put on the public record about your book. You state that the Hadley Centre in the UK has shown that warming stopped in 1998. Where exactly does the Hadley Centre say that?
There are four major centres measuring temperature. You asked me this question before on Lateline. You should get a different game. There are four major centres that measure temperature, and these are done from thermometers. And as we know, temperature centres move. They change in altitude. They change in measuring technique, and they're done from radiosondes, and they're done from satellites. I cannot give you the exact reference here. I can look it up in this book right now and give it to you in 10 seconds. But what this book has shown is that if you've claimed you've read it, and if Mr. Monbiot has claimed he's read it, why didn't you look at page 481? Because in page 481, I nailed the CRU in the University of East Anglia. It's in his backyard. It's a few yards from him. He fawningly accepted everything they said and has criticised everything I've said. Now, why didn't he work as a journalist?
Just on this very question, though...
I will get the reference for you on it, but I will have to chase it up in here.
All right,
there are 2,311 references
here. Indeed, but let's go back to George Monbiot, because he put, I think, 15 or 16 questions about your book on the public record, and he sent them to you, so we presumed you'd seen those questions. George Monbiot.
Yes, they were very straightforward questions. All of them were simply asking for evidence of the claims made in your book, or indeed for references for those claims. You failed repeatedly to answer those questions. However many times I asked, you made up dog-eat-my-homework excuses until eventually the deadline ran out. And it was a quite deliberate ploy not to answer these very simple, straightforward questions of scientific fact. And on that question of the temperature record, where you say there's been no further warming since 1998, the Meteorological Office responded directly to that claim that you made and said it was complete nonsense, that all the figures show very clearly that this has been the warmest decade of the entire temperature record going back to 1850, and that 8 out of the 10 warmest years on record have been since 2001. And what you have done is to cherry-pick that 1998 date, because it happens to be the record ever temperature date, and to say temperatures have declined since then. But were you to take 1997 or 1999 or any single year in the entirety of the 20th century except for 1998, you would have found that temperatures have risen. That is an indication of the quality of your argument and the quality, I'm afraid, of your fabrication.
Your response, Ian Plimer?
My response is, I challenged Mr Monbiot to a debate. He put some questions to me. I said, that's highly unusual. I'll put questions to you. I put 13 simple scientific questions to him. He ducked for cover and said, I'm not qualified to answer questions of science, yet he writes on science. So I talk now to a journalist and not anyone who's got any knowledge about science. Please explain how we had 600 years of the Roman warming when temperatures were higher than now, and we didn't have higher sea levels and we didn't have industry. Please explain how we had a medieval warming of 400 years, temperatures were much, much higher, we didn't have industry, we didn't have super high sea levels, and please explain why the people who you've supported for so long have actually tried to get rid of that medieval warming, because it's very inconvenient. Now, a journalist can answer that,
at the present moment, we were talking about your claims about it cooling over the last 10 years. And can I ask you this? Do you adjust your position when new information comes to light? Because, for example, last week we had the World Meteorological Organization release their annual statement, which says the first decade of the 21st century is likely to be the warmest on record. That 2009 is set to be the 5th warmest year on record. Are they credible?
A couple of points. That is a projection. We haven't yet finished this year. The second thing is the Bureau of Meteorology told us in England it was going to be a barbecue summer. It was not. They also told us that 2007 was going to be the hottest year on record. And what both of you journalists omit is that beautiful four-letter word, time. If you look back in time, you can see that over the last 4,500 years, we've had 75 major temperature changes. We've had periods when it's been much warmer than now. Please explain that.
But could that be